G'day everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to be looking at designing and building this desk. It's got folding steel legs, a solid wood top, and can easily be collapsed down for storage or transport. So let's roll the intro and get into it.
My name's Rob. I'm an industrial designer on a quest to build everything. Welcome to Further Fabrication. I start by defining the dimensions I want the top, and that's 1350mm long by 600 wide, and the working height's going to be 700mm off the ground. Then I can work out the dimensions of the steel legs by first defining the angle we need. Because I want the bottom of the legs to stay in line with the edge of the desk, it's a simple case of sliding the top vertex of the legs inwards until I get the angle that I like. There's no real right or wrong here, but I found around 12 degrees is kind of the Goldilocks zone. I then set the height of the bottom shelves to 100mm off the ground, and then the width is going to be defined by the angle of the legs. I then extrude my lines out into the dimensions of my materials. I'm using 20mm SHS, that's square hollow section, mild steel, and I think my timber should be around 20mm thick once it's been surfaced. That gap I put in the top of the trestles is where the hinges are going to lie, and it's also going to serve another purpose which we'll see towards the end of the build. Once I'm happy with the design, I'm then going to do a render, and I'm going to try and match the colors as closely as I can to what I think the final piece will look like. And this is the final render. I threw a lamp on there just to help with scale. Now, moving on to the build, I'm going to start by breaking down all the steel into lengths, and I'm also going to put chamfers on the edges I know are going to have welds, just so I have good penetration. I clamp my pieces into position and begin to tack weld them on both sides, and repeat that process until I've got 4 frames. For this build, I'm being very deliberate about where I place my tacks, as I want to keep all my welds visible and keep the natural mill scale patina on the steel. I then join 2 pairs of the frames together by welding hinges in the top and then grinding the welds flat with a power file. That takes care of the steel trestles, and it's time to move over to the timber. I'm using rough sawn macrocarpa from a local sawmill and resawing it in small increments so as not to bind the blade up, as there was quite a bit of tension in the boards. I then headed over to the old wood chip maker and skip planed the boards to their final dimension. Because I don't have a jointer, I'm trying something a bit different, and I'm using a flush trim bit on my router and a relatively straight piece of steel as a guide to square up the edges before gluing, which did seem to work okay. Next up is marking and machining the slots for the biscuits. I went with an alternating pattern to help keep the boards in check from bowing during the glue up. Now I liberally applied glue to both sides as I wanted to compensate for any possible voids during my jointing earlier. I know you can't see me doing air quotes, but that's what I was doing there. To keep the glue up simple, I joined the boards into pairs first before then gluing them all together to the final width. I also did this process off camera for the 2 shelves that sit at the bottom of each trestle. Once the glue was dry, I then trimmed the top to length and routed a round over in the front edge of the desk. After sanding to 240 grit, I then applied a finish of Danish oil. The last step is to mount clips that hold the shelves to the steel trestle frame. I used 4 on the outside corner of each shelf, so that when the trestles extend out, they're held captive between the downward pressure of the desk and the clips. The clips on the underside of the desk work a bit more simply. They slot into the gap in the top of each trestle that we created earlier when I placed in the hinges, like this. And those screws that I put in just before, they're sitting in elongated holes so that they can move laterally when seasonal wood movement occurs. Now with that all done, I think we can call this finished. I know this is a big call, but I think desks might be my favorite piece of furniture to build. They're like a sculpture in pure functionality. Nobody owns a desk to go fast or have fun. The only reason you have a desk is to get work done.